Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Future Proof, the podcast where we explore the impact of AI on business growth. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Brent Muller from Deploy AI. At Deploy, we specialize in providing autonomous growth engines that power B2B and SaaS companies to accelerate and scale growth much faster. So if you're looking to grow or scale, or just want to understand how to remove some of the hidden frictions of growth, or just curious about how AI can help revolutionize your operations, don't hesitate to reach out to us. There's links in the show notes to grab 15 or 30 minutes with us. Happy to discuss. But let's jump into today's episode. And I'm joined today by business growth coach, Ian Leaman. Business has dominated Ian's life since childhood, growing up in a family of small business owners. Dinner conversations exploded to stories of challenges, victories, and setbacks. Success in business ignited a fire in him, and it shapes who he is today. So, Ian, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be here, Brent.
Awesome. So, Ian, as we always do, we always start with the leader's journey. So can you talk to us about your kind of your background and your career journey leading up to what you're doing today?
Yeah, happy to do that. So my background is in finance, and as you can hear from my accent, I'm not from the US originally. I had a career based in London in the financial sector, and very soon after qualifying as a chartered accountant with Deloitte, I moved into the deal-doing arena, which really ignited things for me. I was always interested in small businesses growing and then catalyzing that growth through a fundraising, through an acquisition, through an exit. And that's essentially where I made my career in investment banking, taking more than 100 businesses ultimately through that process of growth and exit. Later in my career, when I moved to the US, I became a fractional CFO to a number of high growth businesses, particularly in the tech space, a lot of SaaS businesses, and shared the pain with them and growth pains coming through the earlier stages of business. All the way along these journeys, I was accumulating not just success, but failures. And it's really those failures that become of huge value to businesses pursuing those growth paths. And hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. But also the improvements to business which we can make through coaching particular tools and techniques branded under the Summit OS label, which enable businesses to run like well-oiled machines originally. Over the first couple of years, that's where we get from frustrated and inconsistent growth through to more consistent, more controlled, more predictable and higher rates of growth. And then over the longer term, 3 to 5 years, we do more strategic things, which we refer as building a moat around the business, by which we mean insulating the businesses against competitive action and creating a category of one, which ultimately in the exit and realization mode becomes a huge value add and really adds to the multiple of profits that buyers are prepared to pay.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And I love that you said about the failures, because, as we were talking before the podcast, people don't like to talk about it, but to me, that is the biggest learning and the most impactful and important conversations that we can ever have. Right? Everyone talks about the successes, but it's the bumps, it's the failures, it's the resetting, it's picking yourself, dusting yourself off, and starting over again, and learning from those mistakes, and seeing that firsthand. What you're bringing those to your clients is a massive thing. So talk to us about now, and we'll layer some of these in over our conversation. Talk to us about what you're doing today and some of the people that you're working with.
Sure, happy to do that. Well, let's start off with a great example that fits very well with the profile of a lot of your listeners, which is a high growth, early stage SaaS model business using AI to enable the business and provide solutions. So this business evolved from some very, very successful consultants in the retail space. Their clients were asking them for pretty high-powered consulting advice in various areas. And something they noticed was a difference between what their clients thought their e-commerce sites were delivering to their customers and what the customer experience was actually at the important end of things. And there was a real divergence there. And out of that, they developed some software from that learning. They developed some software which finds and fixes errors for e-commerce websites. And that's pretty scraping technology. And they were able, as a tiny startup, to generate a dozen enterprise level retail customers across UK and the EU, and delivering them an average customer value of around $300,000 a year. Really something quite interesting to start with.
Yeah. And if anybody that's in the e-commerce world, right, and has seen those sites, they're fraught with disconnected errors all over the sites because of the way they're built.
There's an interesting analogy here. The physical retail space has enabled operators to walk the floor. So physical floor, they could walk around, they could see if clothing is missing, a bracket is broken, it's messy, all those things. You can't walk the digital floor. They can't easily spot those mistakes. So this technology is a great application. And as I mentioned, it started with scraping technology. It has evolved through AI in the last 12 months to something much smarter than just scraping and finding errors. It has evolved using AI into fixing errors. For example, product descriptions may be missing, may be incorrect, may be too long or too short, and may not be in the right tone of voice. All of these things can now be fixed by this company's called AIDA, AIDA, Intelligent Systems. And its AI is now replacing copywriters from one of the big global consulting firms. A team of 20 or so was just laid off last month because AI was doing it better, faster, and cheaper. All those things.
Do you remember being having in some of the tech conversations 20 years ago? That was always the question: how can we do things better, faster, cheaper? And it's so funny how these principles never change.
It comes around. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a really good application of AI today in business. But what I'd also like to touch on are some of the kind of tools and techniques which are not fancy AI, but are fundamental to helping businesses operate better and to alleviate the frustrations that owner managers, CEOs experience in growing their businesses. Basic things like getting processes organized, getting them documented into playbooks. Why? Predictability, repeatability, scalability, and risk management. Somebody doing that particular job is no longer there to do it. Someone else can pick up the playbook and get going pretty quickly. So all these reasons. And playbooks is just one of a number of examples of basic things which businesses tend not to do, but once they start to do them, really move the needle and do it very quickly. And through the tools and techniques in Summit OS, we're able within just 2 or 3 months to kickstart various different processes and really start to see some execution momentum occurring very, very quickly indeed. And that's really exciting because it gets everyone aligned around some common short-term goals and objectives. It gets them becoming accountable for progress against those things. It gets them implementing some specific tools. So these things deliver on a promise of 3x your business in 3 years, 5x in 5.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Now, the other layer and the other dimension that's really interesting here is coming back to your opening point about failures and learnings from failures. So having taken more than 100 businesses through the exit process, what I talk about, and most people who are involved in M&A never talk about, is what went wrong. What lessons were learned from the failures from those who failed to achieve that crowning glory of crossing the exit finish line? And how can we implement the learnings from all those failures into businesses which are growing and on the path towards an ultimate exit? Now, many owners will not have that in their short-term horizon, and that's quite fair enough. They're building their value in the business over time, and they're not immediately focused on an exit. Now, my hypothesis is twofold. Firstly, and I've seen this in directly relevant ways in a number of businesses, you can design backwards from your endpoint in the exit perspective very, very readily. You can see very often businesses, as they're growing, starting, know who the ultimate buyer is or what that buyer looks like and has seen the kind of transactions they've done. You can design backwards from what great looks like from a buyer's point of view and implement a growth path which takes you towards that place. Designing backwards from an exit is a brilliant strategy. Secondly, the learnings from everything that goes wrong during an exit process is something that we can bring to companies and help them as they grow to be in great shape. So my hypothesis is this: being in great shape for exit may or may not be something that you feel you're going to be executing the exit soon, but being in great shape for exit is good for every day. And if you can keep your business in that place, you're ready for that knock on the door.
That's
It happens
fantastic.
more frequently than you'd think. And
Yeah.
that knock on the door sometimes can't be progressed, even though maybe a really, really, really good suitor, because you're just not exit ready. Why put you in that place?
Right. So why? Right. Exactly. And to me, you always start with the end in mind. Whether you pull that trigger at the end is another story, right? And so being positioned for an exit is just a smart way to do business. Right?
Exactly.
It means you're buttoned up too.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything's neat and tidy. Your business operates better when it's in that place. And you're avoiding two real challenges later down the line. One is that scramble to get things organized once you're in an exit discussion.
Yep.
And backfilling all the gaps, the missing contracts, the lack of processing, the lack of reviewed financials, you name it.
Right.
And you, possibly more importantly, in terms of real value creation, you're eliminating one of the risks of exit. And that is a fail some point between agreeing in principle and closing. And that fail occurs far too often.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Agree with you more. It's fantastic. So Ian, talk to us about, so you're working with, some different clients, including similar clients to us in B2B and SaaS. What are you seeing in the industry? What are the shifts that you're seeing firsthand?
There's a lot of uncertainty in the economic landscape for earlier, younger businesses now, much higher degree of risk and uncertainty than there was 12 months ago. Those uncertainties essentially are politically driven, but without going into the politics, the effect on business is that decision making becomes harder because of uncertainties on pricing, sourcing, availability of product, etc., on ongoing customer appetite, and therefore predictability of growth. All those things, all those uncertainties cause businesses to pause making decisions they otherwise would. And so the challenge for business owners in this more uncertain, more risky environment is how can we make better decisions on the information that is available than we perhaps could have done a few years ago? And the answer is in the use of technologies. Many, many technologies are directly applicable, and I'm seeing them being adopted in businesses to, for example, scanning and analyzing data patterns. Earlier and earlier, younger and younger businesses are using full-scale ERP systems. And those ERP systems have great data repositories, much more available than they'd ever been in fragmented systems historically. And now AI can interrogate data in a far more useful way than ever in the past. So I'm seeing trends and patterns being exposed from data analysis, which can be used to help make better decision making.
Yeah. Most companies have been really poor at making data-driven decisions. And a founder recently told me, he's like, Brent, he goes, we have tons and tons of data. He goes, but they're in siloed pieces. He said, so I'm data rich and insight poor. And I said, yeah.
Good expression. Another thing that is really interesting and I'm beginning to see is the implementation of voice-based AI systems inside businesses. Now, mostly what I'm seeing is internal conversations being AI controlled. For example, a field service force is calling in and AI is dealing with the scheduling, with the logistics and recording from those conversations. When you listen to them, they feel natural. And it's really not going to be long, I feel, that outbound to B2C and B2B calls are going to be made using those AI technologies. And that'll be a real leap forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're going to see that it's funny. The innovation that's happening on the back end processes, what did someone call it? Basic blocking and tackling that traditionally companies are just poor at. Very poor, right? And I think you started some of at the beginning of your first story about is how they just typically don't do the things that they should be doing. And I think AI is going to help streamline that stuff. And we've had a number of guests recently talking about that. And it's not the shiny object, right? But man, it moves the needle. It definitely moves the needle.
Shiny objects. I think what's also very relevant in today's business world falls outside the sphere of straightforward technology like AI, and it is actually outsourcing to lower cost but highly efficient locations. Now, a good example is I'm working in the financial services space with accounting and tax prep firms, and they have a really significant pinch on young, skilled people coming into that profession. There aren't enough of them, and they're too expensive. And this leads to a depression of operating margins and growth opportunities for those firms. Outsourcing to places like India, where there's a very large number of highly qualified and relevant skilled people hungry for work and at significantly lesser cost, makes a massive difference to operating margins and to a growth appetite by those companies. Now, there obviously is some technology involved in data transfer, security, cloud-based accounting and tax systems and what have you. And those are enablers that weren't there a few years ago. And the deployment of that outsourcing is really, really important in some industries now, where the US just can't provide, doesn't have the young, relevantly qualified people to take those jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you add that, and you add the fact that we have a huge generation that is nearing or entering retirement, and we're going to have a talent gap in many, many industries.
Yes, that's right. I think also COVID has made a huge impact on the younger generation's willingness to be in an office environment, and therefore losing what prior generation of upcoming professionals had, which was learning in situ with senior people who had more experience.
Yeah.
And that's a common complaint of professional service firm owners now. Youngsters are just not willing to take the office-based jobs.
Yeah. So we're definitely hit on some of the problems. When you work with a client, right, and you're helping them with your Summit OS operating system, which is basically working backwards from an exit. Where are your clients' biggest growth challenges, and how are you kind of helping them navigate?
Well, I'm going to be generic rather than specific to try and help answer that, because the operating systems look at kind of big principles behind them about the purpose of business and why each individual business exists, what they're there, how they're going to make their little dent in the universe.
Right.
So communication amongst the management team is often a really big issue. Managers are super busy. They are often spending a disproportionate amount of their time solving problems and challenges and issues rather than focusing on things which may have more impact on the growth of the business. So specifically there, we would implement a couple of things. Firstly, a daily stand-up meeting. And that would be a 15-minute check-in with the senior 3 to 6 or 7 people of the business, only bringing today's problems to that table at that time. And so ensuring there's great communication amongst what the challenges are in the business on that day, that week, and getting potential help on solutions. So that's a fantastic outbreak of effective communication that we can instill with daily stand-ups. The second is teaching the principle which Covey came up with of the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand.
Yeah.
For any of your listeners not familiar with that, I'll just run
We should have got the bottle, right? It's a great demonstration.
Exactly. So I'm just going to try and talk it through, draw it visually. But essentially, you've got a pile of big rocks, a pile of pebbles, and a pile of sand, and a jar. And each day, you metaphorically, typically come in, have some conversation by the coffee machine, go and check the sports results, do other sorts of things which are interesting but aren't actually moving the needle. Those are sand. The sand goes first into the jar. Then you get on to the really urgent stuff that must be done and is nagging at you, and that's your pebbles. And you fill the pebbles into the jar. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, by the time you've done all the urgent stuff, you go and have a look at that pile of rocks. Those rocks are the things that really move the needle for the business. And you try and find some space in the jar, and there isn't much.
Right. You might be able to fit one if you're lucky.
Correct. Flip that around and think about what's really important in your business and discipline yourself to spend the first hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours on dealing with rocks and put 2 or 3 of those in the jar that day. Then get on to the urgent stuff, put the pebbles. And towards the end of the day, once you get to the sandy stuff, you can put as much as you like. It'll all filter through. Everything will fit. And you will have moved your business on much more significantly. That was the lesson with that brilliant example he did in his lab. And we apply that in creating rocks, which are big tasks, which aren't necessarily things you can do in a day, but you're making an impact on that rock.
But you're working on a piece of it, in the
working on
first hour.
something that's going to, once complete, be something which does move the needle in the business. So there's two good examples, the communication and the prioritization of things that really move the needle in the business, they're not rocket science. They are really straightforward things. But if they're implemented in such a way that they make sense and adopted widely and then monitored and reported upon, those really create that execution momentum in very short time.
Could not agree more. And I would tell you that 9 out of 10 businesses do it in the wrong order. Yeah.
It's human nature. It's like a natural state to do the stuff that you find interesting around the water cooler or in the sports results and not crack the big stuff. So we're fighting somewhat against human nature, but muscle memory is a very powerful thing in the brain.
Yeah, you got to fight it.
Exactly.
Or retrain it. Retrain it's probably better.
Retraining it, reconditioning the way you approach the daily tasks. May seem like very, very, very micro, but actually has a really macro effect.
Yeah. All right. Well, just two more quick questions for you. One is, Ian, how, as you look out the next 12 months, right, are you going to continue to grow through your referral network, or are you trying to grow, and scale your business?
Business comes to me through referrals from other professionals working with growth companies who notice that their CEOs aren't so well organized, running around with their hair on fire all day, spending 12 hours a day dealing with problems, getting home wrung out at the end of it and feeling this isn't why I left the corporate world to be an entrepreneur. Right. It's all too common. Professionals like that recognize those issues with their clients and refer them to me. And my business is scalable up to a certain size. I can deal with about 15 companies at any one time, but has quite a lot of leverage in the Summit OS system in that 15 is more than other coaching modes might allow. And we have a bunch of guides across the US, so there's scalability through that.
Love it. We usually do what we call the magic wand question about if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing either in your own business or one of your clients' businesses with AI or emerging tech, what would you use the magic wand to help do, right? Because you're about growth. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's okay if go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of what I do is intelligent conversation,
right,
of the sort that we're having now.
Yep.
I don't see any short-term change to that mode of working. Business leaders value conversation of the sort that we're having with people outside their immediate team because they very often don't have anyone to talk to, don't feel confident sharing certain confidences and just lack the opportunities. And I don't see technologies changing that, the solutions or the underlying need anytime soon, Brent. It's just not going to be there. For me, therefore, where I see technologies applying to my business would be in automating communication processes outside direct conversation. For example, reminding me that I should do a follow-up from a conversation I had maybe by email 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And doing that in an intelligent way, which doesn't demand me to think about that person, figure out when we last spoke, set up a manual reminder, those kind of things. So smoothing the communication.
What's so funny, Ian, that you say that? You're probably half of my execs and leaders I've had on the podcast. That's kind of their number one desire. And lo and behold, my team has built something for that, which is the personal, it's not even a personal assistant. It's almost like a chief of staff. And you can talk to it now and say, hey, I need to follow up with Joe Smith in 3 months, put a reminder on my calendar to do that. Right? But it goes well beyond that. I'll send you a demo of that. But that to me is the number one thing I get from the leaders about how to make their life, because you summed it up perfectly. Even all the people you work with, they're busy people. If you're in any sort of leadership capacity, you're thinking along 3, 4, 5 different tracks at a time, right? Hopefully you're thinking along the big rock tracks, right? And not the sand tracks.
Exactly.
But some of the pebbles are what drop through the cracks. And to me, that's where AI can really kick in and help leaders and execs just not drop the ball on things that is really secondary in their thinking, because the primary hopefully is on the rocks, right?
Absolutely,
but you can't let the pebbles fall. Yeah.
And there's one other area worth mentioning. It's very topical. Part of the communication process is recording, having a record of the communication.
Yes.
And note takers, and ones which summarize well key points and action points out of a discussion are really powerful. Yeah. I'm using them all the time to record conversations with people, prospects, live clients, and then storing those records in a file. So that's a very, very easy way to go remember what occurred or to follow up what's needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And to me, I think that part can all be built in between, what we were just talking about. So a chief of staff kind of agent that you communicate with, but that also can connect to your system and say, hey, we need to send it. We need an email task, a communication, right? But it has to also, like you said, like one of the note takers has to be integrated with it, where you can summarize that. Fathom, right. We've been playing with that one. It just really summarizes things in a really good way. But there's a lot of good ones out there, as long as it integrates. And to me, that's the exciting part about some of these optimization things that AI can do. And that's why I think there's just things that it can do that people would consider boring or blocking and tackling, as we call it, right?
Yeah.
But blocking and tackling is the thing that falls on the floor the most. And I think if we can solve that, people will open their eyes to, wow, if we can do that, we can do all kinds of other things.
Bring on my digital chief of staff.
Yes. I will absolutely get that to you. Yeah, no doubt about it. Because I really think in what you're doing is with your clients is really helping them, like we talked about, button up, right? And rather than that happening at the end and when that opportunity comes along. So I really think working backwards from an exit, whether or not they exit or not, is the smartest thing they could be doing. So kudos to you. I think it's fantastic. Tell everybody how to we're going to put all the links to get in touch with you in the show notes, but tell everybody how to get in touch with you.
So my straightforward email address is Ian, I-A-N, at ianleaman.com, I-A-N-Leaman. If you want to give me a call, I'd love to talk to you.
I love it. Ian, thank you for spending some time with us, for sharing your insights. And we definitely look forward to talking to you going.
Very good. Lovely talking to you too, Brent.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Future Proof. Guys, we will see you on our next episode.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.